Hello, and welcome to another virtual dose of vitamin C, where we bring the Detroit Zoo to you. My name is Zahraa. I'm an education specialist here for the Detroit Zoological Society, where we celebrate and save wildlife every day. Today, we're going to learn more about polar bears. Polar bears are especially adapted for living in a specific region of the world that happens to be very, very cold. To learn more about polar bears, we do need to learn a few vocabulary words first. I'll be mentioning words like tundra, blubber, and sea ice during this presentation. So tundra refers to the part of or the land that the polar bears are found in. So in the Arctic, there is a flat, treeless, frozen land that's referred to as tundra. And then we'll also be mentioning words like blubber, which is a layer of fat inside the body, and sea ice, which is ice that forms on the sea covering the sea. And all three of these things are important to polar bears. All right, so to learn about polar bears, usually we start off with a map when we're learning about animals to see where they are, but this map is a little hard when you're learning about the Arctic. So the Arctic is at the top part of the world, right near the North Pole. But the North Pole, unlike the South Pole, is not made up of land. So it's very hard to visualize on a flat map. So I did point out two different regions to kind of frame ourselves as we look at a different map. So we are right here in Michigan, where the Detroit Zoo is located. And then I also pointed out Alaska so that we can kind of get a frame of reference in our next image. So this looks at the world from the North Pole looking down. So it's as if you took a globe and you looked straight down where the North Pole would be. And the North Pole is actually somewhere in the Arctic Sea. So it's not a piece of land, but a body of water that you would swim through. And it's surrounded by different continents. So it's surrounded by parts of North America, parts of Europe, and parts of Asia. And altogether, they come closer together because the Earth is spherical and make up that Arctic Circle where polar bears are found. And again, I've pointed out where Michigan is and where Alaska is just to show you how this flat map warps around to form that Arctic Circle. So we'll come back to this map later on to talk about the sea ice coverage. But for now, let's take a look, a closer look at polar bears and learn about some of their adaptations. All right, so polar bears have a lot of really cool adaptations that make them very well suited for living life in the Arctic or in that frozen tundra. One of these adaptations is the fur that covers their body. So they have this transparent fur that attracts sunlight, as well as this hollow fur that traps the sunlight. So if you want to look at the hairs that cover their body as kind of like really tiny straws that are hollow on the inside, and once they get that heat, and they can hold on to it and insulate it inside their bodies. Underneath, they have this dark skin, this black skin, that also absorbs heat energy from the sun and helps trap it to their bodies, keeping them warm. These are two really important adaptations for keeping polar bears warm. And polar bears are actually some of the best insulated animals in the world. In fact, even in the Arctic, they can get so warm sometimes that they'll actually go into some freezing water to cool down. Another thing that polar bears have is a layer of blubber. And blubber is this fat that insulates your body. And this fat can get really thick in polar bears. It can be up to 4 inches thick, a layer of fat that's 4 inches thick that covers their entire body and helps keep them warm. But this blubber does come with, this blubber doesn't come naturally. They have to do a lot of things to build that layer of blubber and to maintain it. So polar bears are actually pretty heavy. Male polar bears can get up to 1,200 pounds, whereas female polar bears can get up to 650 pounds. And they do that through a diet that's really high in a lot of fat, primarily from seals. So polar bears have to hunt seals, and they actually have to hunt year round. So they don't get to take the winters off. So a lot of bears don't quite hibernate, but they'll go into torpor, which is like a winter sleep, and they will sleep through the winter to kind of save energy and not have to eat throughout the winter, or not have to look for food throughout the winter. but polar bears do not get that luxury. They have to eat all year long, and they have to maintain that level of blubber all year round. And they do that by hunting for seals all year round. The only exception to this is female polar bears will sometimes then, when they're expecting a baby cub, and she'll stay in there through winter and until the cub is old enough to come out. But otherwise, males and females who are not denning are out there looking for food all the time. And they have to do that by using the sea ice. So polar bears have to hunt on the sea because they're looking for seals, and seals don't really spend a lot of time in the land. And the way they do that is by swimming and by stalking and by just being really great hunters. But they need that sea ice in order to get to the seals and in order to catch those seals and hunt. So we're going to go back to that map as promised, and we are going to look at the sea ice and the changes that have been happening to the sea ice as climate change has had a very drastic effect on the Arctic region. So this picture or this graph shows you a map of the sea ice in September of 1980. And you can see here that the sea ice covered approximately 7.9, so about 8 million square kilometers of the Arctic Sea. This is all hunting space for the polar bears. They can move around from glacier to glacier looking for seals. They can swim, but they can't swim huge distances. So it's really important that they are spending some of their time walking on glaciers and some of the time swimming from glacier to glacier looking for seals. So this map is from 2015, and you can see that the sea ice has decreased a lot. So this is where it used to be. You could see that it was closer to the land, and now it's forming further and further away from that tundra that they live on. And it's not only smaller, but it is further away now, and it lasts less throughout the year because it is thinner and further away. And what's happening is they've lost some of their square kilometers of hunting space. They have to swim longer distances now to get to the sea ice, some distances that they cannot swim. And they're struggling to find their source of food that they need to survive. So remember, they don't go into that hibernation or that winter sleep torpor. They actually have to hunt through the winter. So what they do is polar bears have to survive. So usually they'll switch over to going in a different direction, and they will start hunting on land. So they'll go back to the tundra and go further inland looking for food. So the very deep edges of the tundra are mostly barren, very few animals that meet the requirements for polar bears. Polar bears need that fatty, very carnivorous diet. So they tend to go further and further inland looking for a food source. So this can cause human bear conflict and put the polar bears in greater danger, as well as it can lead to a decrease in the body weight of the polar bear. So they're losing weight, they're not maintaining that layer of fat, and they no longer have all the adaptations they need to live in their habitat. And there are things that humans can do to help with the plight of the polar bear. So the fact that their habitat is changing is influenced by actions humans take. So there are actions humans can take to help maintain the Arctic sea ice and help slow down the changes and build a better habitat for polar bears. So I have an activity that puts you in the space of a polar bear, or in the head of a polar bear, and see what it's like to hunt and make that hunt more difficult, that you can use both for yourself and for others to teach about polar bears. So to do this activity, you actually need very few materials. You'll just need some sheets of white paper, and using recycled scraps works just as well. So make sure you do that. And if you're doing this activity and you want it to be a little safer, I would go ahead and tape those scraps down, because you will be jumping from scrap to scrap, and sometimes it can slide out and make you fall. All right, so once you have your scraps, you are going to lay them down in a path, and either you or the person you're trying to have take on that role of a polar bear will start at one end and have to hop your way from glacier to glacier all the way down. As you do that, think about what it's like to be a polar bear, hunting for those seals, jumping or swimming from glacier to glacier, and trying to catch your food. After you do that first round, go ahead and remove some of that sea ice, remove some of those glaciers, exactly like what's happening in the Arctic today. Now it's spaced further out and it's harder. So go ahead and try jumping from glacier to glacier now. See, is it harder? Are you able to do it in some cases? Has it gotten to a point where it's impossible to jump from one to the next? As you do that, I want you to think about what it's like to be a polar bear and not have the ability to have your needs, to meet your needs through the things you've been doing your entire life. Then get together and think about what actions you can take today that will help the polar bear. So doing this activity helps build that empathy for the polar bear and can really get the discussion started on what changes we need to make as individuals, as families, as groups, as communities to help other beings. So you're building that empathy, you're starting that discussion. Hopefully you're taking concrete actions like promising to eat less meat every week, or maybe no longer idling your car while you're waiting for a curbside pickup. So many different things that we can do on an individual basis that can help decrease what we're doing to the environment. And it also helps you have a way to show others just how hard it is to be a polar bear so that you can start this discussion with them, because the best way to influence or to have a bigger impact on climate change is to tackle it as a group and as a community and globally, really. So if you want more ideas about how to help polar bears and how to reduce your carbon footprint and decrease the effects of climate change, be sure to check out the Detroit Zoo's website, or maybe email us at education@dzs.org to let us know what changes you are taking this week to help the polar bears. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us for another virtual dose of vitamin Z. Be sure to check out soon for some more videos, or be sure to check out the Detroit Zoo's websites for all of our virtual content. Thank you.